This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bentliff, and I'm joined today by Martin Cunningham from ProCFO Partners. Martin, it's great to meet you. It's great to have you on the show where we talk about what is it that we need to do to create the next version of our companies, of our quarter, of ourselves, of our goals, of our strategies. And one of the things that I think is pretty key to that is the temporal space that we live in organizations. So what are we doing annually or every 3 or 5 years as we chart goals? And then what are we doing quarterly or biannually? And then what are we doing monthly? And I think that's something that I want to dig in with you today a little bit is what should I be doing kind of at the end of each month to both make sure that my business is on point, that I know how my business is running, but also that I am in some way moving towards the milestones that I've set organizationally for the future. So let's talk about that just a little bit. Tell me your perspective on kind of what makes an ideal closing out the month. If I'm in a mid or maybe of a small market organization or even a larger kind of enterprise space, what are some of the things that I should be thinking about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for this opportunity, Chris. For most finance professionals, especially those that get kind of into the weeds of preparing financial statements and communicating to the owners and the executive team, presenting financial information is important. But kind of how do you get there? And the process for which we prepare the numbers, refine the numbers, make sure that they're sanitized and reviewed and analyzed in anticipation of preparing that income statement, that balance sheet to president, CEO, board of directors, really is what the monthly close process is all about. So every month there's kind of a cadence to it. Certain business days require certain activities. And, some of the activities that we try and complete and execute, and refine and analyze, really include looking at the bank statements and looking at kind of where the income's coming from, what the expenses look like, what cash looks like coming in and going out with your receivables and payables, having a pulse on your inventory levels, your capital spending, some accounting adjustments relating to prepayments and accruals, looking at the ledger, and then ultimately creating your income statement and balance sheet. This helps us understand, where we're at, what the snapshot looks like, and kind of how to frame the conversation with that team.
Why is it important that I do this monthly? Can I skip? Can I do this every other month? Can I do this every quarter, every 3 months? Is monthly a magic sort of, sensibility for me to have in my organization? Should I be doing it more often? What do you think?
When you look at weekly cash forecasts, that might be something, as I said, weekly. It really depends on the industry and depends on the company. I think that, really from almost mid-size, I'd say even the larger small cap companies probably should do it monthly and going forward. The smaller ones probably can get away with doing it quarterly, as I've seen both. The reason you want to do it monthly is because you, especially those that are publicly traded, you want to have an eye towards that quarterly filing and that quarterly earnings release. The last thing you really want to do is blindside not only your leadership team, but any signaling to the investment community.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we're in, as you and I are recording this, we've got inflationary concerns.
Oh, yes.
All kinds of stuff. And there are organizations out there that are, and I'm thinking about the crypto space, but that's a whole different conversation.
We can talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, there's organizations that are suddenly saying, hey, wait, we've got to do this, or we're going to pause this, or we're not going to make these changes or adjustments. And to the world, especially publicly traded companies, they seem really abrupt. Organizationally, are they that abrupt, or I don't know? Is that a signal that maybe there's something unhealthy in the way that they're managing their reporting or the way that they're receiving information? Are they as blindsided as it seems sometimes? Or
well, I certainly hope not. That would be a bigger problem. But I think at the end of the day, what needs to happen is a marriage of the macroeconomic data versus the company specific data. And that's where the monthly process kind of becomes more and more critical, especially in today's economy, where it is especially volatile given the inflationary pressures, the energy costs. You're looking at supply chain issues and some of the other challenges that companies face that really, at least to this scale, hasn't been seen in 40 plus years. So, I think that as an executive level professional, as I am, the one thing that I want to see is how the company is performing under that stress or under that duress compared to what I understand based on the macroeconomic reports that I research, and how in turn I can forecast that out and try and signal where I think the company is going to land, at least within a reasonable range, with respect to income and where the cash flow is and some of the other leveraged items and KPIs that we measure our company against.
We've talked about this to some extent here on Create the Next, which is who's your audience for these reports. And what I hear you saying is you're making good points around, look, if it's investors, they want to see one thing. If it's the media, they want to see one thing. But if it's the executives, if it's the C-suite, if it's the supply chain management, everybody's got something.
It's going to be all the above, right? So you have to create customized reporting for each of those audiences because they're going to want to look at things differently. They're going to want to create different types of assumptions. And other factors are, or I should say some factors are more important to certain audiences than others. As we create operational reporting, having a pulse on the cost and how materials and freight costs flow their way through the system and how the inflationary issues are challenging might be a little bit more important in terms of highlighting and putting a spotlight on it, where it might be just part of the story, the bigger picture when you're talking to the investment community. So it's all about context and making sure that you're putting those decision makers and those users of your documents in the right position and telling the right story, an objective story, a conservative story, so that they're in a position to make good, solid, informed decisions.
Part of what I hear you saying is almost advice to the CFO to make sure that you are whoever you are in the organization. And even if you're wearing the hat of the CFO, that you are preparing and presenting this in the right way. Talk to me just a little bit about that. What should I be leaning on my CFO to make happen every month for my monthly close? What I'm thinking is, here's a pile of reports. Good job, guys. I'll see you next month. I think that happens too often in organizations. I wonder.
And I honestly, being a chief financial officer is probably no different in philosophy than it is being any other position in the organization. You're going to have some really good ones. You're going to have some ones that really struggle, and you're going to have a majority of them in the bell curve that are average. And I think what separates the excellent from the others really is the ability to get their mind around the information and be able to use that information in an actionable way and develop a strategy and a vision for the organization to carry out using that information. So very good. We love talking about inflation. So that seems to be a prevalent theme, not just in our conversation, but in what's going on in business and on Main Street as well with a kitchen table related topic with gas prices and so forth. So looking at that in particular, it's important to understand in that context what the information is telling us so that we can develop a strategy to combat that, whether it's reducing costs or moving around the supply chain to alleviate some of those pressures. Without good information, I would say that information that those decisions aren't that good, because of the input. I would say, to answer your question very directly as to what the role of the chief financial officer is, it's to make sure that those documents, the income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement, all present good information, quality information, informative information, that can be used and where information and decisions can be derived from.
And then should I be leaning on you to help me understand it? Here's
Absolutely
recommending.
If I don't have my mind around it and I can't provide clean information in those financial statements, then I can't speak intelligently to them. So I'm going to flip that all the way around and say, if I'm doing my job, I'm producing clean financial statements with good information, and I understand it well enough that I can speak intelligently to it.
It's so important. It's so important to be able to do more than just, hey, here's the spreadsheet, but to be able to look to my professional, my complement to say, and here's what it means, and here's what I think we should do, and here's the danger that I see that's 4 months out that isn't on this report, but I can feel it coming, and let's talk about these things. I think that level of acumen is really essential. Talk to me a little bit. I love for our listeners to get really tactical, kind of practical, actionable insight whenever we can. Do you have a recipe for success? What are some steps that I should be following every single month for my close? Like, how do I know that I'm getting it right? Or what are the things I should be doing, both so that I can sort of, self-compare, oh yeah, I'm doing those things, or, oh, hey, I hadn't thought of that. Or if I'm a little bit flat-footed here, great, this is how I can get started. Do you have some advice?
I do, yeah. As I'm starting to show my gray hair and my experience, I've developed kind of a cadence and a 10-step process that ultimately has proven successful just as a repeatable process. And if you do these things and you dive into these things, you should be able to capture 99.9% of what's going on. That doesn't mean that there isn't a pandemic in the future that could blindside us, or a future inflation spike, or even the opposite if we had deflation, which was a risk a number of years ago. But those 10 steps aren't really complicated. You try and make it simple because you want your team to be able to absorb it, do it, and kind of move on from it. And those 10 steps really start out with income and expenses and making sure that they're all recorded properly. Without that, your income statement really isn't worthwhile or meaningful. The second step relates to cash, and that's making sure that you have good deadlines and good stopping points on your collections and your payables in terms of cutting checks and applying them. That creates a good cutoff, which ultimately leads to recognition of revenue and expenses and accruals. The third one is looking at your cash position and reconciling your bank statement, making sure everything is balanced, which coincides with reviewing petty cash. And then the fifth step, which is quite important, is looking at inventory, making sure the count's proper, the costing is properly entered into the system. As you know, one decimal place can mean a lot in terms of how your cost looks, and with some cases it's to the fourth decimal place or something like that. So I mean, it can get very precise in that area. Looking at your capital spending and your fixed assets, making sure your depreciation is accurately recorded, and then looking at your accruals, prepaids. It's number 7. Then you finally prepare your financial statements, and that's also important to note, is that the preparation of the financial statements is really in the latter stage of the process, because you want to have everything put into it before you start taking a look at it. So everything needs to be refined first, and then you do a review, looking for any anomalies to either talk to, or if any adjustments need to be made, and then you start preparing your talking points. And for me, it would be the slide presentation to the executive team and the board of directors.
I love how succinct that is, but I also love how it opens the door for action. So in each one of those, if you're seeing something that requires more study, what I'm hearing you say is, keep an eye on these things. And as your talking points start to develop, that's also maybe where some strategic guidance, maybe we need some new banking relationships, maybe we need to manage our debt differently, maybe we need to be renegotiating some of our vendor or supplier things. All these things come from what for you, as you pointed out, is a simple process, but it leads to potentially more complex and contextual conversations. And I think that's a really great sort of scaffolding for us to have, rather than just knee-jerk reaction or wondering about, or we've got a sense that, I love this idea that you're just compartmentalizing this in an easy to understand, simple, basic way that can lead to more robust conversation.
Exactly. Keep it simple, and I try and live to that mantra. And then kind of to piggyback on your point, anyone can regurgitate the information. We can generate the financial statements and hit the report, submit the report button in the system and generate a P&L. But I think whether it's me or someone on my team, they're trained and developed to look with an eye of scrutiny, to take a look and try and understand it beyond the numbers, to tell a story in words as to what's going on, and try and explain what's going on in the business. It's easy to say, cash went up $10,000 or down $10,000. Anyone can see that. But the better question is why? Did we talk to anyone in the business? Did we talk to the treasury team? So we make it a collaborative process and work with the entire business to make sure that what we see is indicative of what's really going on in the business.
I think that's really important, because also it can help us to know if we're sort of studying the right or the wrong or the incomplete thing. So as you point out, hey, cash went up $10,000. Hey, that's great. Profitability plunged 70%. Why? The conversations become more interesting than just what can look like a big shiny green light up there can actually be a yellow light or a red light if you don't have all of the insight available, and then parsed out and communicated in some sort of a, as you say, keep it simple kind of way, by somebody who understands how to see these things for more or for exactly what they are. That's a skill set, and not all of us have it. And I think if we're not leaning on the right financial guidance and the right financial functions to make that happen, as you point out, we're just kind of flying blind. Even if we have the numbers in front of us, if we don't know what they mean,
that's right,
we can't do anything with it. It's like a map, but we don't know how to drive. So what?
Yeah.
Martin Cunningham from ProCFO Partners. So good to have you with us today. And I love the specific advice and insights that you gave us. This is going to be on the website, folks. So look for the 10 steps. It's going to be really, really easy for you to reference and see what's going on. And if you're incomplete on any of these steps, or this is new to you, or you've been doing this for a while, but it doesn't seem to be working out the way you need to, let's talk to Martin. Give us a call over here at ProCFO Partners. We'll talk to you. Martin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.